Hello everyone, my name is Binh Nghi, and in this video, our group will present to you guys about Chapter 6, Perception and Individual Decision Making. Our team includes 4 people, Nghi Lam, Thanh Tuyen, Tuan Luong, and me. We divided the lesson into 7 parts. 1. Factors that influence perception. 2. Attribution theory. 3. The link between perception and individual decision making. 4. Decision making in organizations. 5. Influences on decision making. 6. The 3 ethical decision criteria. 7. Creativity, creative making, and innovation in organizations. And the last one is summary and references. And I will be the representative for my group about the 2 first parts of this chapter. So, the first one is factors that influence perception. First of all, take a look at this picture. Do you know what is this? Some people think this is a girl. Some might think this is an old woman. Some of you think, oh, I see this before, and based on that experience you know, and challenge yourself to look at 2 different things. As you can see now, there is another picture. You might see that 2 men are arguing whether this is 6 or 9. Anything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is in perspective, not the truth. So, what is perception? When we think about what we just saw, it would make sense that we define this perception is a process by which individuals organize and interpret their sensory impressions in order to give meaning to their environment. That is because people's behavior is based on their perception of what reality is, not the reality itself. It is the way someone sees or it believes it to be, and based on it, you can see how perception is very much influences your action to think. The world as it is perceived is the world that it is behaviorally important. Factors that influence perception. Perception is a combination of factors. In the perceiver, that is the person perceiving things like attitudes, motives, interests, experience, expectation. Why? The situation that you find yourself in, that is time, work setting, social setting. Characteristic of the object or individual or event that you're perceiving, including novelty, motion, sounds, size, background, proximity, similarity. And with these, we come with a preloaded assumption about how the world works, and then the factors in situation. Well, the time involved in a social setting and the things along to those lines, and there are factors in a target, that is what we're perceiving in direct object or of the perception, right? So is it strange or unusual that something novel about the situation? Is it similar to something that we've experienced before? We put all of those things together, and that's how we think through perception. let's move to the next part, attribution theory. When we think about perception, often we think about attribution theory. So we see some external characteristics, the way they look, the way they dress, the way they behave, and we make judgments about them based on that very limited amount of information. Research shows that attribution theory is an attempt to determine whether an individual's behavior is internally or externally caused. Attribution theory tries to explain the way we judge people differently depending on the meaning we attribute to a behavior. For example, Zach did not turn in his homework on time. I might view him as lazy because I attribute that quality of not turning his homework to some internal fundamental characteristic about his personality. But just as likely, he might have a rough week. He had a lot of other projects due, and he didn't get around to turn the homework assignment on time. When individuals observe a behavior, they attempt to determine whether it is internally or externally caused. Internal causes are under that person's control. External causes are not under the person's control. And we can use 3 factors to help us decide if behavior is externally or internally controlled. Distinctiveness show different behavior in different situations. Consensus response is the same as other to the same situation. Consistency response in the same way over time. Element of attribution theory. In this chart, look at the element of the attribution theory and help us to make the connection between external and internal driven factors. First, we observe and then we interpret it under the 3 dimensions, and then we attribute its cause either internally or externally. The first thing, when we observe the behavior, we are going to judge the behavior, and what we consider the first is the distinctiveness, and then the consensus, and the last one is consistency. For example, if consensus is high, then it is most likely externally driven, whereas if consensus is low, it is more likely to be more internally driven. The next part is errors and biases in attribution. Fundamentally error. It is a tendency to underestimate the influence of external factors and overestimate the influence of internal factors when making judgments about behavior of others. We blame people first, not the situation. And then self-serving bias. It is the tendency for individuals to attribute their own success to internal factors while putting the blame for failures on external factors. In short, it is our success, but their failure. Now, it is frequently used shortcuts in judging others. There are some frequently used shortcuts we use in judging others. People will often utilize past experience, their attitude, and their interest to interpret information about others and reinforce their own biases. Relying on this shortcut can lead to misperceiving the situation. Selective perception is when people selectively interpret what they see on the basis of interest, background, experience, and attitudes. The halo effect is another shortcut where generally favorable impressions are drawn about an individual when a single characteristic is positive. The opposite is true when unfavorable impressions are drawn about an individual when a single characteristic is positive. The opposite truth is when favorable impressions are drawn about an individual based on a single negative characteristic. This is also called the horn effect. The contrast effect occurs when we are making judgment about an individual and comparing them to other individuals we have encountered and using comparison to draw a conclusion about them. Another shortcut is stereotyping. So, stereotyping is a typical shortcut that we utilize in the perception process. It is making generalizations about an individual based on the group to which that person belongs. This generalization can be useful in making decisions. However, it can also be inaccurate and cause us mistakenly develop a perception about an individual that is not representative of who they are. Profiling is an application of stereotyping where members of a group are singled out for scrutiny based on a single trait. Application in the organization. You can actually apply all these shortcuts in employment interview, like perceptual biases of raters of faith, the accuracy of interviewer judgment of applicant formed in a single lens 1/10 of a second. Performance expectation. Self-fulfilling prophecy. The lower or higher performance of employees reflect preconceived leader expectation about employee capacity. And the performance evaluation. Appraisals are often the subjective or the judgmental perception of appraisers of another employee's job performance. It's a critical impact on employees. Now, thank you for listening. Next, my teammate Nghi Lam will continue our lecture with her presentation about the link between perception and decision making.
So, hello everyone, my name is Nghi Lam and I am the member of Group 6. So, I will be the representative for my group about the next part of the chapter 6, and I will help you in this part how to distinguish the difference between the perception and the decision making. More than that, we will also have the contrast among three categories. First, the rational decision making, the bounded rationality, and finally is the intuition. So now, first, let's talk about the difference between the perception and the decision making. So I will remind you about the definition of perception, which is the last part of Binh Nghi. And as you have known that, perception is the process by which individuals organize and interpret their sensory impressions in order to give meaning to their environment. And more than that, perception has to be studied as people react with the problem through their cognitive of reality, not the actual what reality is. And in any case, what we see can considerably be distinctive from the objective reality. So I can give you an example about this perception. It means that when we have a problem to deal with, I can give my opinion A and you can give your opinion B, and our opinion can be different because it depends on each person's perception. And maybe our opinion can be different from the actual problem. It means that the objective opinion of that problem. And now we will turn into the new definition, decision making. In psychology, decision making is regarded as the cognitive handle among a few alternative possibilities. It is the method of recognizing and selecting choices based on the values, the preference, and beliefs of the decision maker. Each decision-making handle produces a last choice, which may or may not cause activities. It can be understood as when you have to thinking that what you will do today. So you have a lot of possibilities you can do. You can study, you can wash your dishes, you can clean the house, and moreover. So based on your preference, based on the values of this to-do work, you will pick one of them for doing that day, and which may or may not cause activities. And so people in organization make choices. Thus, they have to make a decision from among two or more possibilities. Top managers for a current, they have to decide their organization's objective. What item or administration to offer, how best to back operation. Below them are center and lower level supervisors. They have to design the generation plans, they have to select unused worker, and they have to decide the pay raises. It also say that non-managerial workers have also made a decision too. They have to make choices that influence their occupations, or they have to decide where organizations they have to work. It's obvious that they also have to make a decision if which day they will have to go to work and how much effort to put in the work they are doing, or how to answer the questions asked by boss. And in expansion, an expanding number of organizations in recent years have been engaging their non-managerial workers into making some job-related decisions. So personal choice making, therefore, is a critical and a portion of organizational behavior. But how people in organizations make a decision and the quality of their last choices is generally impacted by their perceptions. information obtained from such perceptions play a crucial role in the choices made, and such decisions do not always have positive endings. There is a very important need for organization to understand how perception works, or better still, how a single perception affects the whole organizational behavior. And there has to be an understanding of positive and negative effects of using shortcuts, such as selective perception, projection, or stereotyping. And moreover, it should be clear that the perceptions is affected by time, by environment, personalities, or also the history of the perceiver. So the decision made for the same problem may vary from time, from place, from target, or the perceiver, which help us to conclude that the decision made on such circumstance are irrationally. And so I can conclude that there is a totally big difference between these two problems. Perceptions is the process by which we will understand the problem, identify how it matters, what it means. Meanwhile, the process of making decisions is that we have to choose between solutions, and in each solution there will be different ways of perception. The cognitive of the problem will affect the decisions of each individual and organization. So, turning to another part, how many ways that we can make a decision? I will talk about the rational decision making first. We often think the best decision maker is rational and make consistent, value maximizing choice within specific constraints, and rational decision making could be a multi-step process for making choices between choices. The method of rational decision making favors logic, objectively, and analysis over subjectivity and understanding. The word rational in this context does not mean normal or clear-headed because it does within the colloquial sense. And this way of decision making include a logical step. First of all, we have to identify the problem. Second, we have to establish the decision criteria. Third one, we have to weight the decision criteria. After that, we have to generate the alternative. We have to evaluate the alternatives. And finally, we will have to select the best alternative. It means that in this process, you will have to identify the problem and then you will find the solution. And you will find that the solution is best or not. If we cannot do this decision, so what is the alternative of this decision? And then that we have to evaluate one more time the alternatives to see that if it is appropriate or not. And finally, we will select the best alternative. So with this decision-making process, you can clearly have the logical way to identify and analyze the problem, and you will find the best solution for it. And we also have the other definition, and it is called bounded rationality. Bounded rationality can be understood as our limited information processing capability makes it impossible to understand all the information necessary to optimize. For short, it can be understood as we also make the decision making, however, we have a little information of it to make the capability of rational decision making. And other analysts within the field of behavioral financial methods have moreover attempted to clarify why human behavior regularly goes against the unadorned financial level-headedness. And an individual's rationality is restricted by the data they have. So most people respond to a complex problem by reducing it to a level at which they can readily understand it. And the most, maybe the least rational way of making decision is the intuition, an unconscious process created from the distinct experience. It occurs outside conscious thought. It relies on full association or link between the disparate pieces of information. It is fast and is effectively charged, meaning it usually engages the emotions. It's interesting to relate this theory to the work of successful managers and author Jack Welch, hailed as the manager of the century by Fortune. Welch described his approach to choice making in this quote: "Sometimes making a decision is difficult, not since it's disagreeable, but since it comes from your instinct and opposes a technical method of reasoning." Well, captures the essence of intuition and choice making. In differentiated level-headed choice making, natural choices are less organized and include sentiments and perceptions instead of analysis and facts. So Welch's approach summarizes all the hypothetical components of nature and choice making. It means that in this process, intuition will make a decision, but by emotion more than analyze. So we can conclude that there are three ways to make decisions. Rational decision making is a systematic, organized way of working and help us to summarize and view problems in an objective and logical manner. Bounded rationality decision making is also our decision making. However, this way of making decisions is limited by the information we get and leads to mistakes in results. And lastly, intuition making is a sensory decision. We rely only the images we feel and have experienced, so it is most likely to make a mistake. And this part jumps me into the end of my presentation. Thank you for your listening. And now we will come with Tuan Luong for the next part. Bye bye.